14 of the Subcommittee on International Human Rights. Today, we meet to hear from Minister Ng and a number of other witnesses in view of our study in the role of the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise. So to ensure an orderly meeting, I would encourage all participants to mute their microphones when not speaking and address all comments through the chair. When you have 30 seconds left in your question time, I'll kind of signal you with this paper so you can stay on track. Interpretation is available through the globe icon on the bottom of your screen. Please note that screen captures or photos are not permitted. I'd now like to welcome our witness for the first panel, the Honorable Mary Ng, Minister of International Trade. She's accompanied by the following officials from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development: Sarah Wilshaw, the Chief Trade Commissioner and Assistant Deputy Minister, International Business Development, Investment and Innovation, and Chris Moran, the Director General, Trade Portfolio Strategy and Coordination. Well, welcome to our subcommittee, Minister Ng. It's great to have you here. I'm going to invite you now to be able to give us your opening statement, and then we'll move to members for questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to you, to the Vice Chairs, and to all of the members on this committee. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to you, the Vice Chairs, and all the other members of the committee.
It is really a pleasure to be with you and to assist this committee in its important work and to speak to Canadians about our government's commitment to responsible business conduct, and in particular, the establishment of the Office of the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise, or CORE. Canada's reputation abroad is important. When our businesses are expanding globally, they represent Canada. Canadians and citizens around the world expect our businesses to uphold high standards for human rights, to operate with integrity, and to demonstrate our strong values. Our country's international reputation is a competitive advantage. This is something Canadians take pride in, and something that they expect from Canadian leaders, from our institutions, and from companies in all sectors. The Government of Canada is here to help ensure Canadian companies uphold high standards of human rights and responsible business conduct, and I'm pleased that many companies do want our help. If companies do not meet the standards we expect from them, we have tools to help hold them accountable. L'OCRA fait partie.
The CORE is part of the suite of supports that are available to Canadian businesses to help them expand and grow around the world.
In line with our other international objectives, a feminist foreign policy, ambitious climate action targets, and an inclusive international trade agenda that everyone can benefit from, the CORE is a complement to the other important tools like the National Contact Point and amendments to the customs tariffs to prevent Canada from importing goods made with forced labor. The CORE is a complement to a comprehensive set of policies that we have in place to address responsible business conduct for Canadian companies. It is not alone in its efforts and works in concert with other programs and supports to advance our expectations for responsible business conduct. Our government is committed to working with Canadian companies to provide them with the guidance and the tools needed to make responsible business conduct a cornerstone of their business practices. In 2018, we announced the CORE, the first office of its kind in the world, and part of our whole of government approach towards responsible business conduct. What is so unique about the CORE is that this office is specifically built to address human rights issues through both preventative and dispute resolution approaches. The CORE promotes international guidelines and responsible business. She advises them on their practices, policies, investigates complaints, and provides dispute resolution. For the last 18 months, the CORE has been doing the necessary work to build capacity and to hold public consultations, leading to last week when I'm pleased to share that the office officially launched their complaints intake portal and can now formally accept complaints. This is an important step to making the CORE. Je voudrais vous présenter les...
I would like to outline the tools and resources at the CORE's disposal.
The CORE works with complainants and companies to find solution through investigations, discussion, and mediation, and can undertake this work either jointly or independently. Throughout the process, CORE is empowered to report publicly. The CORE can investigate allegations of human rights abuses arising from Canadian mining, oil and gas, and garment companies operating abroad. It has its own budget and staff and advises me directly. And when it does, it can propose the imposition of trade measures, including the withdrawal of government support. If a company refuses to work with the CORE in good faith during her review of a case, she has the tools at her disposal, including the ability to report publicly, to speak directly with companies, and, as I mentioned, to recommend the imposition of trade measures against that company. Beyond this, the CORE proactively advises companies on how to uphold responsible business conduct. This is a significant set of tools. Notre gouvernement prend très au sérieux
Our government takes human rights and responsible business conduct very seriously, and we are committed to working with the CORE as she fulfills her mandate.
The purpose of CORE is to find solutions that help advance Canada's commitments to responsible business conduct and human rights. The outcome we are all striving towards is better human rights outcomes, and the CORE is one tool in our responsible business conduct strategy that can help all of us advance that goal. And with that, I'm very happy to answer any questions that you have for me. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee.
Well, thank you, Minister, for those comments. We're now going to proceed to members for questions. We'll commence with Ms. Sikra Khalid from the Liberals for 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. And Minister, it's wonderful to have you here today. I know that you've been very engaged with this file and with a lot of the challenges in general with respect to how Canadian corporations operate internationally and their relationships amongst the places where they operate. So I guess to start, I wonder if you can kind of guide us through where this CORE, the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise, kind of fits in within that whole framework that we as a government may have in place in terms of holding corporations to account or ensuring that the labor codes, for example, or human rights are being respected in host countries where Canadian corporations operate.
Well, thank you very much, my honorable colleague, for that really important question. I perhaps will set a bit of a context. I mean, CORE is a very, very important tool, but a tool among a suite of policy tools that this government has deployed from day one. So whether it is a feminist international policy, an inclusive approach to trade that has people at the very core of it, companies that must respect environmental protection and sustainability, good governance, and ensuring that there is an adherence to strong labor rights. We've negotiated that into agreements, but we've also but it is how we are operating and how we are creating that framework for Canadian businesses to operate abroad. And the CORE is unique. It is the first of its kind. Its mandate is one where it reports directly to me as the minister, but while the ombudsperson can do promotion and prevention, which is really, really important. I mean, when I take a step back and I think about all of the work that we're trying to do, helping Canadian businesses operating globally, we want Canadian companies to be good actors on the international stage. We want them to respect the high values and high standards for human rights. We want them to operate with integrity. We want them to operate with ethical standards. And we want them to actually have codified policies and procedures in their organization that includes responsible business conduct. So companies that will respect local laws, companies that have good governance, good accountability, and at the very heart, creating lasting benefits for their employees, their customers, and the society in which they operate. And this point about promotion and prevention is a very important part of the CORE's work, in addition to the work that I've just already described, which is the ability to initiate and conduct independent fact-finding. Like I said, the complaints process is now open, and she's empowered to report publicly and throughout the stage of her investigation to promote and prevent, and that's what we want. We want companies to respect responsible business conduct and to carry that through where they operate around the world, but also to give her that ability to have remedy through dispute resolution and through her fact-finding and investigative capabilities.
Thanks very much, Minister. And as I'm sure you may be aware, we've heard for testimony from other witnesses here in this committee about concerns and criticisms around the lack of teeth, you could say, to this ombudsperson and their inability to have, well, they don't have judicial mechanisms to operate. So, but you've stated that you're confident in the CORE and that these non-judicial mechanisms can have their own benefits. Can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. When this office was set up, of course, the model that you will know is set out in Order in Council. And while I was appointed the minister, I took a look at that Order in Council, and the mandate was clear. The office was in process of being operational, so I asked the CORE to establish the office and to implement the OIC as published. I believe the CORE has the tools and the instruments that she needs to be an effective mechanism for human rights abroad. Ms. Meyerhofer herself testified before this committee and stated that she has the necessary powers and resources and tools to be effective. I have full confidence in the work that Ms. Meyerhofer will be doing. And now, as I said, the complaints process is open. She will be able to take those in, and as with any program, we want to give it the time and the focus to do the very, very important work, which the CORE now is embarking on.
Thanks for that, Minister. And just like in previous governments, we've had the Corporate Social Responsibility Councillor. We have the NCP. How do they differ from what CORE is today?
Very, very important question. This position is it is unique. It is unique because it has that it is promoting international guidelines to Canadian businesses. It's advising them on practices and policies. It has a 5-year term. It has a 5-year term that is not at the pleasure of, but rather in good behavior. So therefore, distanced. I mean, distanced in a way that allows her to freely report and investigate, and then make those recommendations to me. And this office is resourced, and it is empowered with the resources and the mandate and the tools for her to do this job.
Is that my time, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Ms. Khalid, that's your time. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Minister. And we're moving over to the Conservatives. Mr. Chu, for 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for coming. I'd like to follow up with the last question there, because the NCP, the National Contact Point, seems to have a similar mandate. Canada has NCP, for example, under the OECD development guidelines for multinational enterprise that oversees the implementation of guidelines to Canadian companies. The NCP is responsible for, and I quote, responding to inquiries and facilitating dialogue and mediation for all sectors in a wide range of issues, including labor issues, human rights, environmental issues, and bribery. So seems to me that there is a significant overhead, and given the CORE also promotes similar practices like in responsible business conduct and facilitating mediation. And why does Canada need a second office that does similar work?
I want to thank the honorable member. It's very good to see you. I hope one day we will be able to be all together again once we're beyond COVID. So it's very, very good to see you, my honorable colleague. The NCP is a very, very important tool. You're absolutely right. And it does work in complementary to the core. What the NCP cannot do that the core can do is that the NCP cannot initiate complaints when brought forward, and the core can. The NCP does not make public the findings of the matters to which they undertake in the same way that the core does. The core can take on fact-finding and investigative matters and is able to report publicly at any stage. The core has a measure of independence and is able to conduct her work with companies and with the complainants and do the work of dispute resolution between the parties, because I'll draw us back to why it's an important tool and what it is that I believe we all want. We all want Canadian companies to be good actors globally. We want to provide them with the tools that are necessary to help them with prevention, and this function, and certainly under the leadership of Ms. Meyerhofer, who who of course was appointed after an open and transparent and merit-based process, and has excellent experience, and have every confidence in her background and her skill set to be able to carry out the work as the ombudsperson for responsible enterprises.
Okay, thank you for the response. When we heard from the ombudsperson herself the last time, she did indicate that the government had backtracked and was not fully supportive of CORE during its formation. Can you confirm that? And why was that the case? Was there a second thought, perhaps, because of the overlapping mandate between NCP and the core?
To the contrary, I have been supportive of CORE and Ms. Meyerhofer from day one of my appointment in this role as the International Trade Minister. At the time of my appointment, I did review the Order in Council, and the mandate for this position was clear. The office was in the process of becoming operational, so I asked her to establish the office and to implement the OIC as it was published. I believe that she has the tools and the instruments that she needs to be an effective mechanism for human rights. The purpose of the core and the national contact point mechanisms are indeed to find solutions to bring about responsible business conduct and to bring about that change. And as Ms. Meyerhofer herself said, that she believes she has the necessary powers and the resources and tools to be effective. So I am very supportive of this work. This office is resourced as well. It has a mandate, it has the resources, it has the tools, and I'm very confident in Ms. Meyerhofer's background and capability. And now that the complaint system is up, she is ready to also do that part of the work. And I want to thank her for the tremendous work over the last year in meeting with over 200 stakeholders from civil society groups to industry to stand up this very important office.
Thank you, Minister. You mentioned about mandate. I would like to ask if you can share with us whether the government currently have plans to expand this mandate for CORE, or perhaps expand its investigatory powers of CORE, and if so, how so?
Well, that's really important. The focus for us right now is to ensure that the core takes on its work. and begins that very important work that, like I said, they are now able to take on complaints. They have been working with stakeholders, getting input on their work, and the work of both promoting, well, all three, promoting, preventing, and having the tools of remedy is what she is focused on, and I'm very encouraged and have full confidence in her work. And of course, like any new program, we can always review it once it has had sufficient time to operate and to see the results that it is bringing in. But right now, we're very focused in the core, doing the work that that she is mandated to do.
So
Sorry, thank you that your time's up. Yeah, thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Chu. Thank you, Minister. And we're moving now to Monsieur Brunel Duceppe.
Mr. Brunel Duceppe, vous avez 7 minutes. You have 7 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses, and thank you especially to the Minister and the other witnesses. This is an important topic that is very much tied in with our pride. When Canadians see Canadian companies operating abroad, I think you will agree with me that some companies do not uphold this pride. There are actions that go as far as being criminal, disrespect for people where they are doing business in those various countries. So, Minister, am I right to say that there are Canadian companies that are conducting themselves unacceptably abroad right now?
Honorable member, it's wonderful to see you, Monsieur Brunel Duceppe. It is really important, and you've said this, that it is a pride of Canada to have our wonderful companies and abroad working globally. And I'm so proud that we have so many of these extraordinary companies. But at the same time, it is also important that companies are held to account to the high standards of respecting human rights, operating with integrity, operating with ethical standards. Companies represent Canada when they are abroad, and Canadians expect them to have and embody those values while they operate. So this function is here to ensure that we are, as another tool to hold companies to account, but also to help other companies be those good corporate citizens abroad.
Wait, no, okay.
Well, that's very nice. It's a politically correct answer, but really my question was, do you not agree that there are Canadian companies that are conducting themselves in an unacceptable way right now abroad?
Companies that are operating abroad absolutely respect human rights and that they bear those standards for good, responsible business conduct. And this tool will help them achieve that.
Unfortunately, I didn't hear the interpretation at the beginning, but right now there are murders, there are disappearances, there's corruption. These things have been documented around the world, and in particularly in Latin America. So are you denying that Canadian companies right now are carrying out actions that are unacceptable? Do you deny that?
What I would say to that is that Canadian companies must be held accountable. Canadian companies must have high standards for human rights. They must operate with responsible business conduct, and we have tools. And certainly through this mechanism, to withdraw services to these companies, to withhold funding from from an important agency like Export Development Canada.
Okay, j'ai pas.
Unfortunately, I don't have very much time, and I can see that you're not going to answer my question. The ombudsperson is mandated with advising you and deals with companies working abroad. Is that correct?
Okay. Est-ce que vous
Okay. Have you asked for advice from Ms. Meyerhofer?
She has begun her work over the last 18 months. Most of it is to work with stakeholders, over 200 of them, and I of course have met with Ms. Meyerhofer in the establishment of her office, and I am very very confident that she will feel freely to do so, to provide advice to me or bring an issue to my attention.
est-ce que
Did she talk to you about the complaints portal and how it is going to work exactly?
The complaints portal was set up, and it is now operational. So complainants, wherever they are in the world, are able to access her through her online portal. I know that she is continuing to ensure that the core, is made available as widely and as accessible as possible, and working with partners and stakeholders in different parts of the world to make sure that she and this function, the core, is available to anyone who wishes to and who needs to get in touch with her and to make a complaint.
est-ce que vous
Well, do you speak to her regularly? Have you had a chance to really have discussions with Ms. Meyerhofer?
Yes, I met with Ms. Meyerhofer very shortly after I was appointed in this file. In fact, at the beginning of 2020, when I joined the Prime Minister on a business mission to Africa, Ms. Meyerhofer was also was present as well, and I have had the opportunity to meet with Ms. Meyerhofer, in respect of her budget, for example, to make sure that she is well resourced and in the setting up of her operation. But of course, my door is always open, and she knows that, and I have every confidence in the work that she will undertake for Canadians.
Thank you, and that's.
I'm looking forward to more questions.
And now we're going to move over to Ms. McPherson for 7 minutes.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the Minister for joining us today to answer our questions. I'm delighted that she's joined us. You may know, Minister, that I've worked in the sector of international development for a large part of my career, and so of course this is very important to me. This work, I've seen on the ground what Canadian mining companies have done in countries around the world, and it's quite devastating. I was very looking forward to having a core ombudsperson, of course, that was promised to us, that was going to have the ability to compel testimony. So you can understand my disappointment with the current regulations, or I guess the current ability that our core ombudsperson has. The question I'd like to start with is, there was a report that came out that was shared to the media after being hidden from public view for over a year and a half. A report that was commissioned by the Honourable James Carr, that made it very, very clear that it was vital that the ombudsperson have the powers to compel witness and documents. Why did your government decide not to follow the recommendations of your own commissioned report, Minister?
Hi there. It's really wonderful to be here and to see you as well. I think I said this sort of in my opening. It's really, really important for the government to ensure that there is the right tools available for us to ensure that businesses are not only practicing responsible business conduct, but that they also have, are also held to account. and you know, as I also said, when I was appointed into this position, the office was in the process of becoming operational, and I reviewed the order in council to which to which this position was created and this function was created, and and I do believe that that she has the tools and the instruments needed to be an effective mechanism for human rights abroad. And Ms. Meyerhofer herself has indicated that. And right now, we're very focused on ensuring that she is able to get to this work. And as with any new program, we will look at its effectiveness. And certainly, as the trade minister, where we're spending quite a bit of energy to ensure that our businesses and increasingly even more businesses are operating abroad, particularly small and medium-sized businesses.
So sorry to interrupt you, Minister. I just have such little time. You know how this goes. My thing is though is that if the right tools to hold business to account from your own report is to have the ability to compel testimony and witness, how can that not be the right tool that you give the ombudsperson? And I just want to follow up on that a little bit in that, you know, if the goal is that Canadian companies, good Canadian companies are doing good work abroad, compelling testimony and witness wouldn't impact good companies. It would impact companies that are not doing a good job. So why on earth would you not listen to the report you commissioned? What would be the harm in actually holding Canadian companies to a higher standard?
Well, certainly in establishing the core, there were a range of options that were considered. The order in council is the decision that was made by the government to provide effective tools, resourcing to the core. The way in which it was set up, I mean, this non-judicial mechanism, we believe also potentially has longer lasting improvement in a company's behavior because of the nature to which the ombudsperson can work with both the company and the complainant and the local community in achieving the change, in achieving responsible business conduct. And the other thing as well is that the way in which it was set up also provides greater accessibility for complainants to come forward to access the core and enable the core to do that important work of investigative.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing something in my speakers. Is there something? No.
Anybody else? No.
Okay. Then I will continue on. So then the last question I guess that I would have for you, Madam Minister, is, you know, do you feel, or I guess I'll see how much time I have left, but do you feel that the fact that you have not put in anything in place that will actually hold companies that don't want to act appropriately to account, do you feel that Canada's reputation will suffer? Because we do know that there are companies abroad that are flying the Canadian flag that are perpetrating atrocities on populations around the world. Do you feel, or could you speak to the fact that Canada's reputation will be impacted, and this conceivably impacts our ability to access, you know, to be on the Security Council, impacts our trade negotiations because we have not played as a good global character on the world stage? Can you talk about the impacts that you could see on that?
I would say that our impact on the global stage has to do with our commitment to a feminist international policy. I would say that our impact is on negotiating and carrying through with inclusive trade practices that have at its core inclusivity for women, for small and medium-sized businesses, a respect for the climate change.
Companies are actually attacking women and girls around the world. Our foreign policy is butting up against our mining, the mining interests of Canadian corporations that we are not holding to account. How do we say we have a FIAP on one hand and we're perpetrating human rights abuses on the other?
We're taking a very, very serious approach around human rights. We have high standards for human rights, and I expect Canadian companies that operate globally to operate with that respect for human rights, operating with integrity and operating with ethical standards. I expect companies that go into communities to work in a manner where they are respecting and providing fairness for their workers, and for the communities that they operate in, so that they really are leaving positive and lasting benefits to those communities. I've certainly,
All due respect, Minister,
thank you, Minister. Thank you,
your
thank you, member.
expectations are not being met.
Thank you. We're now moving to our second round. These will be 5-minute segments, and we're going to start with the Honourable John McKay from the Liberals for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. I don't know who's more surprised by this happy accident, you or me, but nevertheless, we are where we are. As you well know, you and I have exchanged correspondence and had quite a number of conversations about this issue, and to put it delicately, we don't agree. When I started this process many decades ago, it seems now, a friend of mine said something that I thought was quite profound, which was, "These guys don't play to lose." And that's proved true over the last number of years. And I, notwithstanding the significant improvements in particularly in the mining sector, about human rights and corporate social responsibility, there's still, as Madame McPherson said, we are playing with some pretty bad actors. So the issue is quite clear to me. The issue is the power to compel documents and witnesses and other key testimony. And clearly you've made the decision that you do not think that this is a necessary power for the ombudsperson. And both you and I agree, by the way, that Sherry Mayhofer is an excellent choice. There's no issues about that. But let me give you a clear example that I believe Ms. Mayhofer is not empowered to compel anything. So currently before Canadian courts is a case called Nevsum. And Nevsum is accused of using slave labor in order to build its mine in Africa. So the question I have for you, Madam Minister, is does the ombudsperson have the power to compel the executives of Nevsum or documents from Nevsum and in order to be able to review and conduct an investigation of that company?
Thank you very much, and it's terrific to be here on the committee with you. And you and I are colleagues, and colleagues do our work as we do. Of course, the process that governs the court does not preclude additional actions to be taken in a court of law. So in that example, there is an action in the court of law. But the court can certainly initiate an investigation. The court can absolutely make her findings public. The court can provide that her findings to me. The court can advise the withdrawal of services. I mean, and those services, by the way, I mean, the companies that I have certainly talked to find them to be tremendously useful when you're operating globally around the world. You are looking for the services of our trade commissioner, of our missions abroad. You also are looking for, in many instances, the export insurance that is underwritten by a crown corporation like Export Development Canada. So, is she able to initiate an investigation? The answer is yes.
But you would have to agree that it's going to be a limited investigation, because the key people, the key documents, the key executives cannot be compelled to come before the ombudsperson to explain their situation. So we are in the unhappy situation of having the Canadian courts protect human rights abroad. And to date, notwithstanding some of the reluctance on the part of Canadian courts, they are doing a more aggressive job of protecting human rights where Canadian companies do not wish to disclose what's been happening. So again, how is it that the ombudsperson could actually produce a report that would be useful to you if in fact she's not able to talk to the key people?
Minister and member, sorry that the time is up. So we're moving over to Mr. Reid now from the Conservatives for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Why don't we just have the minister respond to Mr. McKay's question for the first part of my time?
Thank you very much, Mr. Reid. I would say that the ombudsperson does have the tools that she needs to operate. She said so here when she testified before all of you at committee not that long ago. If a company does not act in good faith during her process, the COR can recommend trade measures to me. And she can also report publicly. She can report publicly at various stages, at any stage of her review. That is that provides a reputational issue for the company. We can decline future financial support to the company, but we can absolutely withdraw trade advocacy. And many companies who I work with, and that of the international trade team, these are services that are incredibly valuable to businesses that are operating abroad. But let me just take a step back for a second.
Sorry, actually, if you don't mind, because I just wanted to give a chance to answer his question, not to take up all the time I have. Yeah, with regard to withdrawing tools, it seems to me the fundamental tool that a company has that it can potentially use in a situation where it might be causing ongoing harm. Because there's a forensic exploration we could get into of previous practices, but presumably our goal is to prevent new practices that represent some form of human rights abuse. With regard to that, it seems to me the most effective tools are those that come through the securities commissions. You know, if you're a company like Nevsun, for example, and you want to float a new bond issue to support an expansion to your mining operation, you have to pass certain hurdles in terms of demonstrating that you have taken appropriate actions with regard to human rights, environmental stewardship, and so on. Wouldn't it make more sense to focus our attention on tightening up those restrictions, making sure they are more inclusive? And that mechanism, you can't go ahead and get more funding from the private sector unless you have passed those scorecards. Would that not be a more effective way of ensuring that no ongoing human rights abuses can take place at a mine site, textile factory, whatever?
Well, I mean, where I would agree with you is that it's absolutely important that Canadian companies have a respect for human rights and are operating at those highest ethical standards. And what we really want the COR to do, and I believe that she is well on her way and well resourced to do this, is to absolutely do that work of helping Canadian companies be those good actors on the world stage. And let me say that there is quite a lot of work to be done here. I mean, my job as international trade minister is to help Canadian companies get out there and be global, grow the Canadian economy, create jobs, and in doing so, that capacity to help them understand how to best be the responsible business conduct enshrined in policy.
Would the best way of doing that be by allowing the private sector, putting conditions in place where the private sector has to have higher standards? If you don't like what the securities commissions have in place now in terms of the restrictions they place for on companies getting increased funding through, as I say, bond issues, then why not work to get those standards increased rather than taking the approach of having a parallel bureaucracy? Would that not make more sense? Not when we're dealing with some kind of forensic issue as to what might have happened in the first year that Nevsun was set up, to use that example again, but in terms of ongoing practices and ongoing potential for future problems, would that not be the best way of doing it?
Well, responsible business conduct is codified in many, many great companies, particularly those that have a high standard for responsible business conduct, codified in their policies and procedures. And this is exactly what the CORE will be doing, working with companies to make sure that they have really strong, strong good governance, strong respect for sustainability, strong respect for human rights. I mean, looking at how they might ensure. In fact, I met a really terrific company not that long ago that's actually winning awards all over the place. I mean, for their high standard for responsible business conduct, but to create lasting benefits to employees and customers in the societies and the communities that they operate in. And you know why doing that actually is good for the company? Because it attracts investors. It attracts high quality investors. So this role is very important. I mean, to ensure.
Thank you. And we're going to move now over to Monsieur Brunel Duceppe for another 5 minutes, and then we'll have one more questioner and we will be done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to follow up with what Scott has just said. The ombudsperson's mandate includes providing advice on conduct. So we've just talked about that a little bit, but do you think that activists are going to be calling the ombudsperson about these things?
The ombudsperson will be doing that outreach and that considered work with our Canadian companies, so that building that capacity for companies, helping them understand, what good responsible business practice is, de-risk any risk that might come from not having such good practices in their companies is what she will be doing. She will be doing that with Canadian companies.
But the problem may be something else, because Ms. Meyerhofer said that she has a team of fewer than 10 people. So it seems to me that that isn't a lot of resources when you look at how many mining companies we have working abroad.
That in the creation of this office, that our government has committed to providing it with resources, certainly more resources than the function that existed before. We committed in the budget of 2018 $6.8 million over a 6-year period, and then $1.26 million thereafter. And certainly in this year, I have approved in-year increases for her to increase her staff.
I'm sorry, Minister, I really don't have very much time, and I certainly don't mean you any disrespect if I interrupt, but do you know how many Canadian mining companies are working just in Mexico? I can tell you, there are 200. So 200 Canadian mining companies just in Mexico. And what really jumps out at me is that that's very few people to look at the actions of all of these mining companies. So it seems to me that given how many Canadian companies work abroad, the ombudsperson is not going to be able to do a whole lot. Supposing I'm living somewhere in the world where there is a Canadian mining company, perhaps people are being beaten or the water is polluted, how do I get in touch with this ombudsperson?
Very much for that question. The ombudsperson works on her own, of course, but she also works with an incredible collection of whether it's industry associations or NGOs. In the last year, a little over a year, she has spent her time consulting with over 200 external stakeholders, so that she can create those very important partnerships to complement and to work with her. That same network.
No, my question is really, if I am somebody living in Mexico, for example, and I see that there are problems with a Canadian mining company, how do I go about contacting the ombudsperson?
She is exactly working on that right now. Of course, the portal for complaints is open, but her creating of this network, the promotion of the CORE's existence, working with a collection of non-governmental organizations as well as associations and industry associations, really to be able to promote the efforts of the CORE and the existence of the CORE is absolutely what she is doing. She's very she's very committed to that accessibility.
But I imagine with this complaints portal, then what happens after the complaint gets through the portal?
Qu'est-ce qui arrive?
Well, she will assess it. She will assess it and undertake her work, which would include opening a file and undertaking the work.
Donc, j'imagine qu'elle va vous.
Well, I imagine she will be providing advice to you, and so.
Oh mon Dieu, on pourrait parler
You're good that way.
longtemps.
You're
Okay,
good that
merci.
way. So, Minister, this will be the last questioner, and that will be Ms. McPherson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Speaker or Madam Minister, I'm just going to quote from the McIsaac report very quickly for you. It says that it is fair to say that without a way to compel the cooperation of entities against which a complaint is made or others who may hold relevant information, the CORE's effectiveness may be compromised. We've also heard from the CORE Ombudsperson, from Ms. Meyerhofer, on Global News that she does feel she could be more effective if she had extended powers. She publicly has said that. So what I'm interested in knowing is what would be the rationale for not giving the CORE Ombudsperson the ability to compel testimony and witnesses? Because we know that Canadian companies that are adhering to good practice wouldn't care because they would not be compelled or complained against. But bad companies would care. So why are you sticking up for bad Canadian companies that are not adhering to human rights? Why not give that power to compel and compel testimony and witness? What is the rationale for that?
I want to thank you for that question. Let me be clear. I expect Canadian companies to uphold human rights. I expect companies to be good actors on the global stage. I believe that the CORE has the tools and the resources that she needs. It is also new, and as I've said this already. I mean, with any new program, we will be absolutely open to review this, given the sufficient time for it to do its work. I am very confident in the work that Ms. Meyerhofer is going to do. I am looking forward to her accelerating this work, but this office is an important one, and it's an important one in the context of the suite of work that this government is doing around the world, inclusive trade being one, feminist international policy being another.
I still don't understand why you wouldn't add that in, because it does feel like you have a whole bunch of reasons why the CORE Ombudsperson is good the way it is currently set up, but no real answer for why you wouldn't want to give them further powers to compel witness and testimony. I'm just going to ask a few questions as well. Minister Ing, have you ever spoken to somebody from a community that's been impacted by Canadian mining detrimentally?
I spent some time last year on a mission to Africa. While there, I had an opportunity to speak with non-governmental organizations and the Canadian organizations that are doing some terrific work and challenging work on the ground, and I fully appreciate the responsibility that our Canadian companies need to bear and bring to bear when they operate globally, and that we uphold those values that are absolutely core to our Canadian values, upholding human rights and ethical behavior.
I guess, again, that means probably you haven't actually spoken to somebody on the ground. One of my concerns about this particular role is that it seems to me like, why is it any different than under Harper? Why is it any different than Harper Light? Basically, we had a position, we had an ability We had an expectation. I'm sure the minister under Stephen Harper also expected Canadian companies to act appropriately. They don't. They don't act appropriately. We have facts about that. So your expectations that this will happen don't seem to be based in a historical, factual sort of climate. I'm just wondering, why would you say this is any different than without the power to compel testimony and witnesses? Why is this any different than what Harper put in place? We still had companies that were perpetrating human rights abuses. We still had somebody who couldn't compel documents and witnesses. It seems very similar to me. This seems like Harper Light. Show me why it's not.
Well, I totally disagree. The Corps operates at a distance from me. They have a longer term. She is able to initiate investigations. She is absolutely able to, in fact, do the dispute resolution work with the complainant and with the companies with a view and an objective to creating more sustainable, positive
power to compel.
behavior.
That would make it easier for her to do that work.
As I said, I believe that the Corps has the tools and the instruments that she needs. Ms. Meyerhofer has indicated that, and I'm looking forward to her beginning her work. And like any new program, happy to review this, but she is focused on beginning that work, and I'm looking forward, and I have every confidence in the work that she will be doing.
Minister, thank you very much. That's going to conclude our time. We thank you for appearing before our committee.
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Bernal-Duceppe.
Oui, je suis désolé, juste pour vous dire, on a commencé 8 minutes en retard. Moi,
I'm sorry, we started 8 minutes late. Since we started 8 minutes late, I would suggest that we split the time so that every party has 2 minutes. We rarely receive a minister here in this committee.
And so we're going to move on to our second panel.
Calculé 8 minutes. Mais bon, j'ai pas mes mathématiques de secondaire 5, mais j'avais
It's a very short time.
Minutes.
There's very, very little time, But we thank the minister on behalf of all the members. Thank you to also the officials that were here for taking that time to appear. And members, now we're going to suspend and move within a few minutes. We'll start up with our next panel. Thank you.
Merci. Thank you.
panel on the role of the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise. Again, for the benefits of our new witnesses, I'd encourage all participants to mute their microphones when they're not speaking and address all comments through the chair. When you have about 30 seconds left in your questioning time, I will signal you with this paper. You can see it. For our witnesses, interpretations available on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen in either English or French. And also to just to make everybody aware, there are no screen captures or photos permitted during the meeting. With that, our second hour, we have the following witnesses that we just heard as they were getting their mics set up. From the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner, Surya Deva, Vice Chairperson, Working Group on Business and Human Rights, welcome. And from Export Development Canada, we have Ms. Lavery, and welcome, Ms. Lavery. She is the President and Chief Executive Officer. We're going to commence with Mr. Deva. Please proceed with your opening statement, and then we'll followed up by Ms. Lavery.
Mr. Chair, good evening. Thank you very much for inviting the UN Working Group on Business and Human Rights to share views about the role and powers of the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise CORE. The Working Group has a mandate to promote the effective dissemination and implementation of the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. We work with the states and other stakeholders to discharge this mandate. If we requested, we can provide advice and recommendations regarding the development of domestic legislation and policies relating to business and human rights. Access to remedy for business-related human rights abuses is an important component of UN Guiding Principles. As the Working Group clarified in its 2017 report to the UN General Assembly, affected rights holders should be able to secure an effective remedy. That means a tangible outcome, not merely access to a remedial mechanism. While effective judicial mechanisms are at the core of ensuring access to remedy, state-based non-judicial grievance mechanisms such as the CORE also have an important role to play. However, several conditions should be satisfied to allow the CORE to fulfill this role effectively. The CORE should meet the effectiveness criteria stipulated in Principle 31 of the UN Guiding Principles. In addition, I would like to reiterate our recommendation made in the 2018 report on the country visit to Canada. We had recommended the Canadian government to ensure that the CORE, and I quote, it is well-resourced so that it can provide effective and timely remedies and recommendations for complainants. Furthermore, the office should have total independence from the government, undertake meaningful investigations, and have the investigatory powers to summon witnesses and compel stakeholders to produce documents to fully address human rights abuses, unquote. This recommendation made 3 years back is very much relevant even today. Moreover, the mandate of the CORE should not overlap significantly with other non-judicial grievance mechanisms, such as the Canadian National Contact Point. For example, if the CORE mostly adopted collaborative approaches of facilitating dialogue and mediation, it might end up duplicating what the National Contact Point should be doing. I also think that the CORE should not have the mandate to advise Canadian companies, because this may create a potential conflict of interest if it were to deal with complaints against these very same companies. In short, if a core objective of the CORE were to provide effective remedies and hold Canadian companies accountable for their overseas human rights abuses, it would need more powers to fulfill this objective. The CORE should have the power to investigate, power to compel documents and testimony, and the power to enforce its recommendations against companies. With such powers, the CORE would not only be able to remediate, but also prevent human rights abuses linked to overseas operations of Canadian companies. Mr. Chair, I would also like to take this opportunity to encourage the Canadian government to develop a national action plan on business and human rights. Similar to the regulatory initiatives unfolding in Europe, it should enact a comprehensive mandatory human rights due diligence legislation covering business activities both inside and outside Canada. Only then Canada would be able to claim rightfully global leadership in promoting business respect for human rights. I look forward to our dialogue today, and the working group also welcomes further opportunities to engage the Government of Canada as well as the Corps in promoting responsible business conduct in line with the UN guiding principles. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Deva. Ms. Lavery.
Merci, le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable members, good evening, and thank you for the invitation to speak today.
Conversation concerns the role and powers of the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Enterprise. I welcome this opportunity to provide additional context for the larger discussion, that is the intersection between the promotion of Canadian international business and the protection of global human rights. For the last several years, the company I lead, Export Development Canada, has been guided by an agenda that puts the pursuit of sustainable, responsible, progressive, and inclusive trade at the center of its business operations. This agenda is built on the foundation of policies that deliver clarity and accountability in three key areas: environmental sustainability, business ethics and transparency, and of course, the protection of human rights wherever EDC's customers do business. This foundation is aligned with the best practices and highest standards of business today, but more importantly, I believe, it is aligned with the expectations of Canadians everywhere. It is also, of course, the right thing to do. Before I go too deeply into EDC's history and approach on human rights, it may be useful to provide committee members with a brief primer on EDC's role and mandate. EDC, Export Development Canada, is a Crown corporation dedicated to helping Canadian companies succeed on the world stage. As international risk experts, we equip companies of all sizes and in all sectors of the economy with the tools they need to grow their business with confidence, using a wide variety of solutions from advisory services to financing and insurance offerings. In 2020, EDC facilitated over $102 billion in business for more than 24,000 Canadian companies, about 70% of which were small and medium-sized businesses. Along with these activities in 2020, EDC took on an additional domestic role, helping with the Government of Canada's pandemic economic relief efforts. This is not the place, nor is there time to go into all of our activities in these extraordinary circumstances last year. I will simply say that pandemic or not, underlying all of EDC's solutions and support is a belief in sustainable and responsible business practices. Central to this is our commitment to human rights. Getting to this point has not been a straightforward journey. There have been many important and sometimes difficult lessons about the kind of impact that international business can have when not managed with appropriate oversight and due diligence. But straightforward or not, it is a journey EDC is committed to and one that continues today. Our first statement on human rights was released in 2008, and since then we have made consistent efforts to improve our performance in lockstep with evolving best practices and the highest of international standards, including those of the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. By 2019, EDC became Canada's first commercial financial institution to release a dedicated board-approved human rights policy. This policy outlines the principles that guide our internal decision-making related to both our customer relationships and our transactions. It also underscores our intention to use our leverage for the purposes of influencing our customers and enabling remediation in those instances where there is evidence of severe human rights risks and impacts. Today, we continue to work to develop the due diligence tools that will help us implement these leverage and remedy commitments. The intersection between human rights and international business is an area of tremendous complexity and increasing public scrutiny. EDC understands the complexity and welcomes the scrutiny. When and where we have fallen short, we believe in accepting responsibility and finding ways to do better. That is our promise. But given the nature of our mandate, there will always be risks. The key is being alert to these risks and addressing any initiative that supports this objective is one that EDC welcomes. I believe the Canadian Ombudsperson for Responsible Business is such an initiative. Indeed, embedded within our 2019 human rights policy, there is already a commitment to take steps to cooperate with the efforts of CORE, and while it is still early days, we look forward to working with the office. I am hopeful that this new body can contribute to our shared goal of managing the risks and challenges of international trade for both the sake and success of Canadian companies, and for better outcomes for people and markets around the world where those companies do business. Merci de votre attention. Je me ferai un plaisir.
Thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Marie and Mr. Deva. Now we're going to proceed to the members for questions. We are going to start off with 7 minutes to the Honourable John McKay from the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. The first to Mr. Deva. I take your evidence is that you can't be both have the ability to compel testimony, compel evidence, and impose sanctions, and simultaneously be an advisor, a facilitator, a mediator, and do the, if you will, the softer functions. Essentially, the difference between a judge and a person who's a mediator. Am I interpreting your evidence correctly?
Mr. Chair, 2 points of clarification. First of all, I was suggesting that the CORE should not duplicate what NCP does in Canada, which is mediation, because there is not much purpose served in giving the mediation power to CORE, because that function is already done by the National Contact Point in Canada. My second point is that one of the mandates of the CORE is advising companies. Now, if the CORE advises, let us say, company X to do ABC, and then the CORE receives a complaint against the same company, then this may raise a potential conflict of interest. That advising should be differentiated from CORE providing generic guidance to businesses how they should respect human rights. That is different. But if this advising involves advising specific companies to do ABC, that will definitely raise, in my view, potential conflict of interest. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'd now like to turn to EDC, and when I started with Bill C-300, I remember distinctly an interview with your predecessors, and the core point that they were making, not to turn a point, not to pun that, is that EDC had a robust corporate social responsibility approach, and that really this was a redundancy that was unnecessary, and we were already doing it. Apparently, the views have changed over time, and now now you're looking forward to working with the core person. So the question I have of you is with respect to the extent of your examination of supply chain slavery, and in particular, you lend a lot of money to a lot of companies, very high-profile companies, and I would like to know what certification EDC obtains from those potential recipients of government-backed funding, that they have examined their supply chains and they are satisfied that the supply chain is free of slave elements.
Thank you, Minister, for the question. So if I was to reframe your question, it's really a question around the due diligence practices of EDC, perhaps with a specific focus on supply chains. So this is a framework and an approach that EDC has continued to evolve over the years. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, it's one that has been enhanced since 2008 with respect to human rights. So I would say it is a risk-based approach. So we really start by looking at the transactions, at the nature of the transaction, at the nature of the relationship with the customer. And we're really looking for risk indicators to indicate if they are in a sector, if they're operating in a specific country, if there's specific activities that we are aware of in supply chains that we should be watching for. So we would start our due diligence. We would know that we have those flags, and should we indicate that any of those were found to be the case in our discussions with our client, we would then move into an enhanced due diligence situation, which would require us to have a much deeper dive and understanding of the supply chain of the company. We then discuss it with them. We ask them for evidence. We ask them for copies of their processes. We're really trying to understand their management system for identifying any risks that they might have in their supply chain. We would also ask them for any evidence that they have that they are able to produce with respect to any risks that they can prevent or mitigate with respect to supply chain.
Is that a certification process? Do you get them to sign in the same way that an audit would be, that there is that the companies you lend to are free of supply chain slavery?
So what we can do is very often under our environmental and social risk management framework, we do arrive with an environmental and social action plan. And those are items that we would have included with in the loan documentation, very specifically in our financing operations. And then it's a commitment, and we continue with enhanced monitoring throughout the term of the loan to ensure that any commitments that the company has made, that they are living up to
enhanced moderating is not a certification process. So there's been a number of stories run by the Globe and Mail, run by the Toronto Star, run by CBC about companies that potentially you lend to, particularly in China, but elsewhere, that have dubious supply chains. Are any of those companies, do any of those companies fall within your mandate of people that you've lent to? And are you concerned about any of the companies that were identified in the press recently?
20 seconds.
So I don't have the specific names to comment on those, Minister MacKay, but I can say that we consistently apply our due diligence processes, and if we had concerns of that nature, we would not be entering into the transactions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And now we'll move over to Mr. Reid from the Conservatives for 7 minutes.
Thank you. Let's stay with Ms. Lavery if we could. How often do you find yourself in the position to reject a request for financing on human rights grounds?
So Minister Reid, I should perhaps start off by distinguishing the nature of the work that we do. I would say we have a number of our customers who are repeat customers. So we have an ongoing relationship with them. And then we have customers who are perhaps coming to us from the first time. So it's quite a different process for us. As it would relate to new customers or coming to us for the first time, we would go through the process. And yes, there are times when we have said no with respect to human rights. We did publish a transparency and disclosure policy in 2020, and we will now be disclosing in our annual report the number of times by which we turn down transactions. So that's part of our enhanced disclosure activities. As it relates to
so just before you get to that, I just wanted to say or ask you, when is that report coming out?
It should be coming public in around the end of April, start of May.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Now, as it relates to existing customers, that's a very different type relationship, and that's what I was speaking about with respect to monitoring. And then I would say it's a very different situation, and that gets us into the discussion that the professor was mentioning around leverage and remedy. And as we, as a financial institution, we're very, and our human rights policy is very clear on this point, we actually want to understand, is there an item, if we are made aware of a situation, of course, we're going to reach out to the company and start to have a dialogue with them, but we're immediately going to go in and understand, can we use leverage if there is a severe human rights impact to ensure that the company is addressing it. So it's not an immediate withdrawal of support, because that may not actually help the impacted parties the most. But it is an assessment at that point in time as to whether EDC has enough leverage to actually make a difference to the remedy situation.
Thank you. I'm turning now to our other guest. I have a couple of questions just relating to, first of all, but the first question I have is, Mr. Devo, were you here for the first part of the discussion with the minister, or did you not get to hear that?
I heard last part of it, last 20 minutes or so.
Okay, so there was a discussion of a Canadian company, Canadian-owned mining company operating in Eritrea in Africa called Nevsun. They run a mine at a place called Bisha. The accusation has been made and is currently working its way through the Canadian courts that forced labor was used not by the company itself, but by a government-owned contractor when the company was being set up. I went on behalf of this committee to that mine site and took a look around along with the Canadian ambassador. And one of the things that has been on my mind thinking of that experience is when we talk about things like giving the ombudsman power to compel testimony or documentary evidence, I don't see how it would get to a supply chain issue where all the documentary evidence is in another country beyond the power of any apparatus the Canadian government could set up. So for a situation like that one, or any other one where there's a supply chain issue, someone has done something in supplying you with a product and it's outside of Canada, what kind of remedies realistically do you think are available?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will try to answer this question in two parts. First is that what are the possibilities of seeking the evidence from the ground if it is in some other jurisdictions other than outside Canada? And the second is the remedy part of it.
Okay.
In terms of how to get it, there are several practices. One possibility could be that the Corps could request those documents through the Canadian company, because these companies have a contract with the suppliers abroad. And in those contracts, it is quite possible for the Canadian company to stipulate human rights clauses and conditions. And that would allow this Canadian company based in Canada, or which Corps has jurisdiction to get documents, to indirectly get these documents, even if it is happening in Africa, Asia, or Latin America, anywhere. That is one possibility. The second possibility is we can draw from the experience of national human rights institutions that have done some informal collaboration with peers in other jurisdictions. So let us say if the Corps would like to collaborate with a national human rights institution in elsewhere, then they can collaborate together, and through that institution, they can get some evidence and facts from the ground, from the victims in those particular situations. The third possibility could be that there could be bilateral agreements between the Canada and that particular country X, and those agreements should be used by Corps to get that source of information. And I think that is where this dynamic power becomes quite relevant. If the Corps does not have those powers, it cannot use those multiple options. Having the power is different from using the powers. I should stress this point. Because if you have the powers, let us say stick, then the collaborative approaches works more effectively, because companies know if they do not collaborate and cooperate with the Corps, a stick can be used. But if the Corps has no stick, then the collaboration does not really work in many hard cases in which companies are not willing to collaborate.
Just before you go on, the chair has given me a signal that I've got only 30 seconds left. I did have one further question I wanted to ask you that relates back to your first response. You indicated that a Canadian company could, for example, we could require them to stipulate certain conditions. That will only work, I think I'm right in saying this, on a go-forward basis. That is to say, it can only work for the creation of future contracts as opposed to reaching back into the past, as would have been the case with the mining company we discussed. Do you think I'm correct in saying that it only works for the future, that doesn't make it's not valuable. It just means that it will only work on a go-forward basis to prevent future abuses as opposed to allowing us to reach into past abuses.
I think even in the past cases, either the contracts can be revised or the Canadian company could use its leverage to get those documents. So it's not impossible to get this information even about the old contracts or the continuing contracts.
Thank you. Just before we move on to the next questioner, I'm just going to ask Ms. Lavery, if you don't mind just raising your mic a little bit, because we're getting a little bit of that breathing or popping sound for the interpreters. Thank you very much. And now we're going to be moving to Mr. Brunel Duceppe for 7 minutes from the block.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the witnesses for being here with us tonight for this important study and for their testimony. Can you hear me properly? Yes, you can hear me? Good. Okay. Mr. Deva, there are a lot of Canadians that believe that Canada is a leader when it comes to human rights. And we're certainly not the worst on the planet. But I'm not sure that we are as good as we say. Canadian companies who are active abroad, can you tell me how Canada compares with other countries?
Mr. Chair, I will confine my remarks to business and human rights, which is a subset of human rights. And I think leadership is judged by what a country or a company is doing, not what I is saying. In the field of business and human rights, there are significant developments taking place in Europe, where mandatory human rights due diligence legislation are being enacted, or access to remedy is being improved. And I think Canada is lagging behind on those two elements, in my view, at this point of time, because the Canada has not yet enacted. I see there's some discussion going on about a mandatory human rights due diligence legislation. And the core, in my view, is a good step. But without those powers, a core will not be a viable institution to provide access to remedy in a non-judicial setting, because there is no point in creating another NCP. When we visited Canada in 2017, we recommended that the CSR counselor should be replaced with something more robust. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
OK, excusez-moi, la traduction terminait.
I'm sorry, I had to wait for the end of the translation. So you have to give me a few seconds, Mr. Chairman. So the way things are set up right now, Mr. Deva, is this not in line with the UN High Commission on Human Rights and its guidelines?
That UN guiding principles provide generic guidance, but as I was reminding the subcommittee members, we visited Canada in 2017, and we issued a report in 2018 to the Human Rights Council. And in this report, we made very specific recommendations what powers core should have. And I don't think the current mandate and the powers tick those boxes that we have recommended as independent experts. Based on my knowledge of Canadian mining companies operating elsewhere, I will not name these companies, but based on my engagement, I can say with confidence that companies, many of them, are not willing to cooperate with remedial mechanisms. And this is not unique to Canadian companies. So I don't want to say that only Canadian companies behave like this. Many companies from all over the world are not willing to cooperate. And that is where states have an obligation. It's an obligation under international human rights law to ensure that Canadian companies respect human rights, both within Canada and outside Canada. And this is non-negotiable. Promoting trade should not be at the cost of undermining human rights. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So logically, the Canadian government should think about having a due diligence kind of legislation in this area.
Chair, yes. So my suggestion would be, and I, in my opening statement, I recommended that to the government, they should adopt a comprehensive human rights due diligence legislation, which covers labor rights, human rights, environmental rights. And these companies operating anywhere in the world, and when it comes to crown corporations like EDC, they have a higher responsibility under the UN guiding principles. So this mandatory human rights due diligence should apply to all these companies. And if they do not follow those practices, then there should be consequences in terms of effective remedies as well. And I think that legislation will also make the core more effective, because otherwise now it does not have those bases. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Par exemple, si je me suis...
Well, what you said before, just to go back to the situation of the Uyghurs, for example, you said that we can't really ask the businesses to report on their supply chain.
I'm not fully sure if I understood the entire question or something was lost in translation. I'm not sure. You were talking about some Uyghurs issues in the supply chain?
That's
Oui, non, mais
correct.
parce que
No, we were talking about the supply chain, and you said that many companies don't want to cooperate. But we know in China, for example, there are problems. We know that the supply chain is using forced labor by Uyghurs, so the companies aren't the ones that are going to really examine their supply chain. That's what you're saying to us, right?
I was not saying that in reference to the Uyghur situation in Xinjiang, but I think my response would be that if a company is unable to conduct meaningful human rights due diligence, whether it is Xinjiang or Myanmar or anywhere else, then that company has to stop doing business there. I think UN guiding principles are very clear on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ouais. No, je pense qu'il y a eu un petit...
No, I think maybe there was a little bit of a problem there. Perhaps I didn't understand properly. I just have 30 seconds left. Ms. Lavery, what is the problem with the due diligence context? Because we are seeing serious abuse, so there are problems. What's the problem? What is going wrong?
Please.
Mais si on rajoute les temps de traduction... Puis...
We should add a little bit of time for the interpretation. I think I need another 45 seconds.
So at EDC, the due diligence process is working as planned. It is highlighting where there may be issues, where there may be potential for severe risks. And that is leading us to have conversations with the customers before we support them or we support a transaction to ensure that they can mitigate that risk or that they can provide appropriate remedy thereafter. So I can't speak to in general for companies, but at EDC, it's working.
Thank you. Thank you. And you got your 45 seconds, Mr. Brunel-Duceppe. Now we're moving to Ms. McPherson for 7 minutes from the NDP.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for joining us today. It's an important conversation to be having, and I appreciate their insight and their input. Ms. Lavery, you just spoke about the fact that the EDC is working as planned. Your response to my colleague from the block is that it is working as planned. Unfortunately, we have seen, and I think my colleague, Mr. McKay, has also pointed out that we have seen examples where companies that are acting in very bad faith, that are not acting environmentally and socially responsible, have received large sums of money from the EDC. Just last month, Oxfam Canada released a feminist scorecard, and it noted that Export Development Canada provides billions of dollars to support the oil, gas, and mining industries annually. We think that, but will the EDC call for changes to the Export Development Act to include the prohibitions of business activity that violates human rights or exacerbates gender equality? So I'm just wondering, you say that it's working as planned. We have all these examples where we're actually funding some pretty bad actors. What will you do to make sure that that stops? How will we make sure that that doesn't continue?
So thank you, Madam Minister, for your question. Perhaps I could break it down into a couple of different components. So there is the component with respect to a gender element to your question. And we absolutely agree. In our due diligence with respect to human rights, we are very clear that our due diligence covers vulnerable people, and that vulnerable people is for sections of the community that are either protected or that are at greater risk of severe human rights. So women, children are included in protected communities, as well then as human rights defenders who may be subject to severe risk. So those are categories that we do cover in our due diligence activities. As it relates to our support for the oil and gas industry and for the mining industry, they are absolutely industries that EDC does support. They're very significant contributors to the Canadian economy. And I would suggest that not all members of those industries are bad actors. And that's what our due diligence process is out to identify. Now, we also have to recognize that when EDC does enter into relationships, particularly financing relationships, they can be very long-term financing relationships. And we have seen instances whereby financings that we have done in the past, that our due diligence procedures have changed over time. So there is a time element to this as we continue to add and continue to augment our procedures in line with international best practices. So whether that's the OECD, with respect to their due diligence practices on supply chains, whether it's Equator Principles 4, which has brought in the concepts of free and prior informed consent. We continually add to that, yet there are some transactions that we have done many years ago when those pieces of legislation did not exist. But I do believe that it is working properly and that we will continue to support all Canadian companies with respect to the sectors of Canadian GDP.
Thank you. And just to clarify it, for some of these examples that I have in front of me, it's in fact not very long ago. There is examples of, in so recently as 2018, of Canadian companies not acting ethically abroad. So it is not something that happened in the past. And I just want to clarify as well. So the process would be then that you will ask for documents, you will ask for evidence, you will ask for risks. If the companies don't give that to you, that's where that review ends, and you can implement enhanced monitoring. But for the most part, if you ask a bad actor to give you documents that they don't want to give you, that's the end of that?
No, I would not say that. I mean, that is one of the points that we use as a point of reference. Of course, they would be the person we're transacting with, so we want to get their perspective and want to get their details on it. But we will be continuing to scan the media. We will be equally working with some of our civil society organizations to understand. I would say we're also watching for risk flags. We're very conscious that there are areas with which EDC and Canadian exporters participate in that are more susceptible to human rights. So whether it is with respect to the oil and gas, mining, the garment industry, I would say one of the emerging sectors is with respect to telecommunications and technology, and the ability there to deal with privacy matters or withholding of information or subversion of populations using communication technology. So my team are continually looking at those things.
Thanks. Sorry to interrupt. It's just we know we have such limited time. The one last thing, I mean, we have examples of companies where, we have a mining company or an oil company where 190 workers and contractors were killed in accidents. We have massive hydro dams that have almost ruptured. We have really serious human rights abuses happening around the world with Canadian companies. I just wonder if you could talk on the impacts that you feel these bad actors, these companies that do not adhere to human rights law, to environmental law, what is the impact on our international reputation, on Canada's reputation, and how does that impact companies that are following the rules, that are acting in good faith?
So in my opinion, it does impact the brand. And certainly in my discussions at international fora, that question is often raised to me with respect to the legacy that some Canadian companies have left around the world. And therefore they're asking me what is different and what is EDC doing to ensure that the companies that they support today are not participating in those practices. So if I was to give you a general response, I do believe it impacts negatively the Canadian brand.
Okay, thank you. Members, we're going to be moving into our second round, just based on the time and splitting it up. I'm looking at about 3 minutes per questioner. So we'll commence with Ms. Khalid for 3 minutes from the Liberals.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd just ask our witnesses. I do have 2 questions, so I hope that you'll answer them as succinctly as possible. So I'll go to Mr. Deva first, if that's okay. Mr. Deva, the CORE ombudsperson appeared before our committee a couple of weeks ago, and she stated that there's no other office like the CORE in the world, and that this office was the first of its kind. And with your vast experience, do you know of any other oversight body that has a similar function? And if yes, what's the difference?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think CORE is in some ways unique institution, but it is not unprecedented to have an institution like this, because there are national human rights institutions which have the power to investigate, power to compel witness and evidence. And I can give concrete examples, and if the committee would like, I can send some documents.
But they don't have the same mandate?
They have a wider mandate. They can deal with human rights abuses, including by businesses, compel evidence, witness, and they can also enforce their recommendations. So I think, so we can draw inspiration from those institutions which are there. So CORE is somewhat unique, but it is not unprecedented. That this has never happened. There are institutions which are already doing something like this. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know, one of the arguments that's made for CORE and why it may not have powers to compel, etc., is that you know, there's concerns that Canadian companies may begin to take a very legalistic approach to the ombudsperson investigations instead of cooperating. And I know that you had mentioned you know, about having a stick to kind of enforce cooperation. So what is your response to claims like these? And would court powers, you know, like which exist for companies or for issues to go through that court process for obtaining documents, etc., how does that kind of play into what your recommendations are for how CORE can be improved and how to build that collaborative relationship?
Mr. Chair, in fact, I met Ms. Mary Hofer in the first very day of her office, and we agreed that having more powers will be more effective. I don't know what her current position is and what evidence she gave to the subcommittee, but I've been in touch with her, and she agreed that more powers will be necessary. Whether those powers needs to be used in a particular case or not is a separate issue. And I would like to repeat that having the powers as per the due process is something which is needed. Companies also have due process rights, but they sometimes do not cooperate. And if they do not cooperate, then those powers have to be used to provide effective remedies. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And thank you. And that concludes your time. So now we're moving to Mr. Chu from the Conservatives for 3 minutes. I can't hear you. You may have to lower your mic.
Yes, I have that problem. Yes. Just to follow up on what MP Khalid was asking, comparing to the world, Canada, it's not by far the most with the most number of overseas investment and operation around the world. You mentioned that Canada definitely have things that we could actually do better, and in terms of mandating the CORE. But I wonder how it's Canada and also Western countries comparing to some of the up and comers like, for example, the companies from the People's Republic of China, in terms of respecting and compliance to local environmental regulations, mediations of labor conflicts, and following human rights guidelines of the UN? How would you say that?
I mean, every country is different, Mr. Chair. So I think it is difficult to compare apples with oranges. But of course, Chinese companies operating globally are facing significant challenges. And I think this is a big concern for the Working Group on Business and Human Rights, that these companies in many situations are not respecting human rights, whether they're operating inside China or outside China. But I think we should not be looking at those examples. Rather, Canada should be leading, right? So if as a global leader, it would like to lead on human rights, it should look at the countries and companies which are leading, rather than looking at countries and companies which are not leading on this particular front. At the same time, I should also clarify that we should not be making sweeping statements, right? So like all Chinese companies are this, or all Canadian companies are like that, right? So I think there are good companies and bad companies operating from different jurisdictions, different countries. So I think we should be taking evidence-based, objective approach. But I think the roadmap for Canada is very clear. It must enact.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I would actually like to take on your offer to table for the committee the list of countries in previous question. MP Khalid asked you that you offer, and also in the remaining 30 seconds, I'd like to comment the Working Group on Business and Human Rights. What kind of oversight does it have on global international companies investing in other operations?
In about 20 seconds, Mr. Deva.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be happy to provide additional information in terms of what powers these national human rights institutions have in different jurisdictions and how CORE can be inspired from those powers in terms of their mandate and jurisdiction. And regarding your second point, the Working Group on Business and Human Rights, we do not have the power of investigation. We have the power to accept complaints, but then what happens is we write to the governments and companies that they should respect human rights, and so we have the power of persuasion. And that is the point I'm hammering again and again. We should not create institutions.
Thank you, Mr. Deva, and we appreciate that you will forward those documents. Now we're moving to Mr. Brunel Duceppe for 3 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et comme c'est moi, Madame.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this will be my last question. I want to thank the witnesses. Ms. Lavery, I have one last question for you. Do you think that the companies that you have financially supported are guilty of human rights abuses?
So thank you for the question. As I said at the outset, we support over 24,000 Canadian companies and a number of international companies as well. We rely on our due diligence processes to ensure that the companies have not have made human rights impacts around the world, and we can to ensure that they haven't. That being said, if something was to happen, that's a discussion that we then have to enter into the company with around how they are and use our leverage as to how they're going to remedy that situation.
Est-ce que vous pensez que présentement...
But do you think right now that it is possible that there are currently Canadian companies that you support that are violating human rights?
So I am personally not aware of any company that EDC is supporting that is violating human rights.
Okay, parfait, merci.
Thank you. Mr. Deva, I have a last question for you. The ombudsman and the minister seem to think that a website is enough to deal with human rights problems, but in fact, multinationals may be working with the local authorities, and so how can people there be confident in contacting the ombudsman because there may be surveillance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the website is a good starting point, and I've seen the website and a number of ways in which a complaint could be made to the CORE and all this. But I think going forward, CORE has to really go to those different countries where Canadian companies are operating, especially if there are significant number of Canadian footprint in those countries. So you would have to go to the local jurisdictions, work with the Canadian embassies and consulates in those jurisdictions, create tools which are in the local language, and create tools in which people can report in confidence, because state business nexus is also a big issue. There's a corporate capture. So sometimes the government officials leak information to the companies, and this is problematic. So I think we have to safeguard against those risks to the defenders and the victims. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And that's your time, Mr. Bernal-Duceppe. Thank you. And we're now moving to our last questioner, Ms. McPherson, for 3 minutes.
I would like to also thank all of our witnesses for joining us today. Very interesting conversation. I have some questions actually for Mr. Deva. First of all, I would certainly like to follow up with my colleague, Mr. Chu, and encourage you to submit documents. If you could share some of the examples, the concrete examples, and also if you wouldn't mind tabling the most recent UN working group recommendations to Canada to be part of this study. I think that would be very useful. I'd like to follow up on the question that Ms. Khalid asked earlier. The minister has talked about this being a very groundbreaking or very new office, first of its kind in the world. But if I understand what you're saying correctly, this version of the CORE is replicating what the NCP has already done. Would you say that is correct? And yeah, maybe just comment on that if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll be happy to provide those reports which are relevant for this subcommittee's mandate for this particular issue. In addition to the CORE, let me be very clear. It's not an either-or situation. CORE is an important step. Let us get this right. At the same time, to make it effective, it needs those powers which it lacks at this particular point of time. We made that recommendation very clearly before it was established. We made that clear in 2018 when it was not even established. And those boxes have not been ticked. And my understanding is the government did promise that those powers will be conferred on this CORE, and they have not been conferred. And I will repeat what I have said earlier in my opening statement. The mediation is done by the National Contact Point already. What is the purpose of the CORE investing its resources in mediation? Because that power, that function is already done by the NCP. That is duplication. So we should create CORE somewhere between NCP on the one hand and the courts on the other hand. So it should be able to function like a non-judicial body, which is not doing what courts do and which is not doing what NCP does. And it can do that if it has those powers, which we have recommended it should have in 2018 report.
Thank you. And just the last question I have for you, Mr. Deva, and I'd asked this of other witnesses as well, of course, but what are the impacts on Canada's international reputation when we see what companies are doing around the country? And I know it is around the world. It's not every Canadian company. It's a small number, but what is the implications on our reputation?
Yeah, in 30 seconds. Thank you.
I think the reputation of any country is at stake if it cannot ensure that its international human rights obligations are respected. So UN guiding principles expect all states to lay down expectations from their businesses operating whether inside or outside. And I think it is an obligation of Canadian government to lay down those expectations through a mandatory human rights due diligence legislation and provide access to effective remedy through courts and non-judicial mechanisms like the CORE. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you. And that brings us to the end of our time available for us this evening. We want to thank Mr. Deva, Ms. Lavery, our witnesses for appearing before us today. And that will conclude your appearance here at our committee. And we thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I am going to ask the members to just to hold on for a little bit. So we can just go over some committee business. Clerk, just let me know when we can. Okay, can move forward. Okay, thank you. So subcommittee members, in the interest of allowing the clerk and analysts the break weeks to proofread the report and send to Faye as soon as possible. I'm asking you if there's any appetite to finish consideration of the displaced persons draft report by agreeing to the title in the next 5 minutes or so that we have here to finish off our day. If there is an appetite, we could do that. If not, if we need to debate that, then I'm just looking for a show of hands. If everybody can give me the kind of the thumbs up from everybody. Okay, thumbs up, great. All right. So clerk, do we have the working the different titles?
Yes, I just redistributed the earlier email with those 3 suggested titles in it in both languages.
Okay. And so I'm looking for if members have anything, if they want to bring forward any input into those titles. I'm not seeing any. If you want to raise your hand on the side there. Okay. If I could see a show of hands, the first title, if you like that, if we could just have them read out by maybe the clerk or the analyst and see about the first title that's available.
I can go ahead and read them.
Okay.
So I'll go with the first one. So the first one is pouring fuel on the fire, the impact of the global COVID-19 pandemic on displaced populations. Do you want me to read them in French as well?
Yeah, please.
Donc, pour le premier titre, le feu aux poudres, les effets de la pandémie mondiale de la COVID-19 sur les populations déplacées. For the second title, Igniting a Crisis, the devastating impacts of COVID-19 on displaced populations globally. En français, le déplacement d'une crise, les effets dévastateurs de la pandémie de la COVID-19 sur les populations déplacées dans le monde. Third title, the impact of the global COVID-19 pandemic on displaced populations, case studies of Venezuela and Myanmar. Et en français, les effets de la pandémie mondiale de COVID-19 sur les populations déplacées, les cas du Venezuela et du Myanmar.
Okay, thank you. I do see Heather has her hand up. Yes, Heather.
The only thing I would say is that they seem to go from 1 to 3 of the most exciting or most dynamic to the least, I guess. And I'm not sure that dynamic is what parliamentarians are supposed to be. So I think number 2 is a nice center of the road. So that would be what I would propose.
Okay, I see Mr. Chu, and thank you, JP, for reading those out. I appreciate that. Mr. Chu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I totally concur with MP McPherson.
Okay, that's 2 votes for 2. Monsieur Brunel-Duceppe.
I thought Scott was going to go first, but I think that I like number 2 too.
Okay, number 2 for Brunel-Duceppe. Scott?
You know what? Let's make it a consensus. I like 2 as well.
Okay.
Very liberal.
Okay. I think I don't know. I don't think I see any more hands. I think we're all good with 2, right? Okay, fabulous. Okay, 2 is the title. Terrific.
Mr. Speaker, I do have my hand up very, very quickly if I could.
Oh, you put it up again. Sorry, I didn't see.
Sorry, yeah,
yep.
I'm all over.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm just wondering whether or not this would be a time I could bring forward the motion that I'd shared with the committee. Since we only meet once a week, I am hoping that we could look at that very, very quickly if that's possible.
I don't, you know what, if it'll get into a debate, we're at 8:32. I was thinking we would
Why don't we just do a vote and see if it could pass, because it's consensus.
You know what, why don't we just finish this in terms of the motion to adopt the report, and then we'll see if members have any appetite to get into that. Okay. Okay, so that the draft report as amended be adopted. Everybody's okay. That the report be entitled, JP, read it out one more time, number 2.
So, igniting a crisis, the devastating impacts of COVID-19 on displaced populations globally. et le déclenchement d'une crise, les effets dévastateurs de la pandémie de la COVID-19 sur les populations déplacées dans le monde.
Merci beaucoup. Thanks. And that the chair, clerk, and analyst be authorized to make such grammatical editorial changes as may be necessary without changing the substance of the report. And that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the subcommittee requests that the government table a comprehensive response to the report. Everybody okay? Yep, seeing consensus. Okay, terrific. Okay, Heather.
So what I was just going to suggest is that it is a very short motion. I sent it out some time ago. Of course, we have very tight timelines because we do only meet once a week. It isn't something that is particularly controversial, and it of course would have to go into, we would have to start planning for it, but it would go after some of the studies that we've already initiated, so it wouldn't come for some time. But that considering that the vaccine rollout is probably going to be one of the most important issues of COVID-19, that I think it's important that we look at the human rights implications of the vaccine rollout around the world. It gives us an opportunity to talk about it in terms of making sure that countries around the world have access, talking about the implications if that access is not given, how we can ensure that it is equitably given to people in marginalized or vulnerable populations. I think that it aligns incredibly well with the work that this subcommittee does, but I understand that the subcommittee is consensus. So this is not in any way supposed to be partisan. It's not in any way supposed to be an attack on anyone. It is supposed to be a close look from the International Human Rights Subcommittee at the human rights aspect of vaccine access and how we can make sure that all people around the world, from all vulnerable populations, refugee populations, can access the vaccine in an equitable way.
Thanks, Heather. I do see two hands up. I had Ikra, I don't know if you brought it back down, and then I had Anita.
Yeah, no, I just, as much as I think that this is an important topic, I'm looking around the world at, some of the ways in which authoritarian countries are really clamping down. I know we had a whole list of countries, like, for instance, Uganda was one that I put forward. I know that with what's happening in Myanmar, it might be worth revisiting what's happening there. We have only so many meetings left. We also had a number of studies before, and one of my worries is that anything that we do, there's always a time lag between when we do it and then when we report, and with things going so quickly on the vaccines, I just think that...
Point d'ordre, je suis désolé, je comprends pas pourquoi j'ai...
I have a point of order. I can't hear the translation right now.
Moi, je crois que il y a beaucoup d'autres choses.
I think that there are a lot of issues like Uganda and so on.
Ms. Venables no longer using her headset, and so regardless of what language she speaks, there won't be any interpretation.
I apologize. I wasn't expecting
Thank you.
So I took it off. I'm so sorry about that. So I'll very quickly recap. I don't want to keep everybody, but I really think right now we have a very particular committee. Still not working? It's not working? Uh-oh.
Je pense qu'il faudrait que tu connectes ton micro, que tu le choisisses, Anita.
That's better, right? You got it? Good?
Yeah.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. No, my apologies. Je suis désolée, j'ai oublié le micro.
I'm very sorry.
I just wanted, we are a very particular committee. When we have a one-off meeting and we shed light on something that's happening in a particular country, it has massive impact in that country. I know that, what we've done on Cameroon and some of the others, this has actually impacted what Congress did. And I think there are a lot of places in the world right now where there's no international eyes. With COVID-19, everyone's turned inward. So we have a unique role as a committee. I had proposed Uganda at one point. I think we should go back to Myanmar because when we did that study, the coup hadn't happened there yet. I think we have a very particular niche as a committee where we can shed light where no one else is. And we have so few meetings left and so many countries in the world in crisis at the moment that, not that what you're raising, Heather, isn't important, but I would just say that, it may not be the number one priority. So I'd rather focus on some of really our, for want of a better word, our core
I do see Ikra's hand up, and then I see Alexi's hand up. I don't want to keep this going for, you know, the next 20 minutes or whatever. So what I'm saying is, Heather, I think we
Point
either.
of order, Chair. Just
Yep.
to very quickly, did we not have an extra time allocated to do committee business? Was that not included in today's schedule?
I tried to build in 5 minutes. That's what I tried to do. I actually ended up only with 2 minutes at the end there, and I've gone over now now we're at 8:38. So we did not have that time. No.
Mr. Chair,
we only had that time if we had consensus to work through the title and to move the report. That's what I wanted to do. That's what we had allocated time for. We did that. I think we have to move this to our next meeting. I would say, members.
Yes, please, Mr. Chair. I'm completely late for another engagement that that I had committed to.
Yeah,
Si je peux me permettre,
If I just may, Mr. Chairman, we can. 30 seconds. We can adopt the motion and we can decide to do this study later. We can adopt it and we can just decide to look into the matter later. And then.
Right now, so. No, there's no consensus.
Okay.
Okay. So I think we're going to adjourn at this time. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.